is held in a soft, velvet silence as the stars begin to fade into the hazy gray of a coming dawn. And inside the small stone scriptorium, the air is perfectly still and cool. A single small candle casts a dim, rhythmic orange glow against the high, arched walls and the smooth wooden desks, creating a space that is perfectly safe, perfectly warm, and entirely still. The air is thick with a comforting, heavy scent of old parchment, dried iron gall ink, and the faint, sweet dust of the library, all lingering in the quiet room like a soft, invisible blanket. You are invited now to let your own breath slow down, to match the steady, peaceful beat of this ancient room, and to drift away into the gentle, repetitive motions of a day built of ink and soft, white pages. Let the silence wrap around you as you prepare to rest. Chapter 1. The scribe stirs in his small, quiet room, long before the sun has thought to crest the distant, sleeping hills. His eyes opening slowly to the familiar patterns of the shadows on the ceiling, and he feels a deep, heavy sense of calm as he pushes back the thick wool blankets to stand on the cool, solid floorboards of his room. He dresses in the dim light, his fingers moving with a quiet and practiced memory over the soft linen of his tunic and the worn leather of his belt. And the house remains entirely silent around him, a stillness that feels like a kind and gentle weight pressing softly against his skin as he moves toward the scriptorium where the books are born. He walks with soft, rhythmic footsteps across the stone floor, the transition from sleep to work marked by the cool touch of the air and the faint, sweet scent of the ink that waits in its ceramic jar. And he enters the workshop where the candlelight is already dancing on the walls. In the center of the room stands a great oak desk with a slanted top, polished by years of hands and paper. And the scribe reaches for his first task, which is the slow and meditative preparation of the parchment, a sheet of fine vellum that is as smooth and white as a cloud in the summer sky. He selects a piece of pumice stone, feeling the rough, grainy texture against his palm, and he begins to rub the surface of the vellum in long, sweeping circles, a slow and repetitive motion that requires no thought at all, just the steady rise and fall of his arm, a movement that feels as natural as the breathing of the trees. Rub, swirl, lift. Rub, swirl, lift. And with every movement, the stone makes a soft, shushing sound that is like the ocean far away. He repeats this many times, his mind drifting into a state of quiet meditation where the only reality is the texture of the vellum and the rhythmic sound of his own breathing, until the surface is perfectly clear and ready to receive the ink. Next, he turns to the ink, the small pot of dark liquid that sits in its stone well, and he begins to stir it with a small wooden stick. watching as the black liquid swirls in a slow and hypnotic circle. The ink is rich and deep, smelling of oak galls and iron, and he stirs it until it is perfectly smooth, the scent rising to meet him in the quiet air like a familiar friend who has waited all night for his return. He prepares his quills next, selecting a large feather from a white swan, and he takes his small, sharp knife to trim the tip, the metal clicking softly against the quill as he carves a perfect, sloping point. He works with a slow and deliberate precision, ensuring the nib is split just right so the ink will flow with a steady, gentle grace. And he runs his thumb over the edge to feel the sharpness and the strength of the feather. He lays the tools out in a neat and orderly line on the desk, the quills and the knife and the ruler, each one having its own place in the quiet order of the morning. And he feels a deep and abiding contentment. The air in the workshop is beginning to brighten as the first hint of gold filters through the narrow window, casting long and soft shadows that stretch across the room to touch the far corners where the scrolls and the empty jars wait in their own patient silence. He feels the coolness of the morning air on his face and the warmth of his own steady breath, a perfect balance of sensations that makes him feel grounded and safe, anchored in a moment of time that belongs only to him and the quiet work of the dawn. There is no hurry, no need to rush, for the lines are small and the day is long. And so he lingers over each small task, checking the points of his quills, or simply standing still and listening to the deep, resonant silence of the stone walls. His breath is slow and steady, matching the pace of his hands. And as the world begins to wake with the first soft light, he feels a deep and abiding contentment, knowing that everything is in its place and the day is unfolding exactly as it should. He touches the edge of the vellum once more, feeling the incredible smoothness and the coolness of the skin, and he prepares himself for the first letter of the day, his heart full and his mind quiet as he begins to settle into the long, beautiful stillness of his craft. Chapter 2. The sun has climbed a little higher in the soft, blue sky, casting a warm and buttery light across the scribe's desk, and he begins the long and meditative process of writing the first lines of the manuscript, his hand moving slowly and deliberately across the white vellum. He takes up his finest quill, the feather feeling cool and light in his fingers, and he dips the tip into the small bowl of black ink, watching the dark color cling to the nib in a tiny, perfect drop that catches the light like a jewel. He brings the quill to the paper and begins to draw the first letter, the movement starting in his wrist and flowing through his fingers, a hypnotic cycle that feels like the swaying of tall grass in a summer breeze. The quill makes a soft, scratching sound as it moves across the vellum. Scritch, 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 a sound that is as rhythmic and calming as a heartbeat. and he watches as the dark line grows behind the point, a tiny river of ink that becomes a letter. He moves with a steady, unhurried pace, his hand never wavering as he forms each curve and each line with a deliberate precision, ensuring the letters are all the same height and the same width. A perfect row of silent soldiers standing on the page. Downstroke, upstroke, curve. Downstroke, upstroke, curve. A pattern that has no beginning and no end, only the steady and hypnotic rhythm of his own breathing and the soft heartbeat of the room. He leans his weight forward, his eyes following the tip of the quill as it creates a world of words and stories. And he finds that his mind becomes as quiet and clear as the air above the clouds, far away from the worries of the world. He touches the surface of the parchment with his free hand, feeling the incredible smoothness and the coolness of the skin. And he pauses for a long minute just to breathe in the earthy, clean scent of the ink as it begins to dry. Every few lines, he reaches for the ruler and the lead point to mark the next rows, his hand moving in a steady, jumping rhythm that mimics the heartbeat of a tiny bird. Dot, line, curve. Dot, line, curve. And he finds a quiet joy in the way the page is organized, a perfect grid of order in the middle of the silence. After a time, he reaches the bottom of the page, and he pauses to let the ink dry, watching the wet shine slowly turn to a deep, matte black that looks like velvet in the sunlight. He takes the edge of the vellum between his fingers and turns the page, the sheet sliding across the wood with a soft paper sigh that fills the quiet room. Slide, settle, a sound that seems to slow down time itself. He begins the next page with the same slow and steady grace, the quill dipping into the ink and returning to the vellum, the rhythm of his hand becoming a part of the rhythm of the house. The room feels like a sanctuary, a place where the clocks of the world have stopped, and the only measure of time is the slow, invisible growth of the manuscript and the slow turning of the sun across the wooden floor. He feels the warmth of the light on his shoulders like a heavy, golden blanket, and the air is thick with the scent of the drying ink, a combination that feels like safety and home and ancient wisdom. He does not rush, for the words he writes are eternal, and so he loses himself in the repetition, his eyes half closed as he listens to the soft rustle of the wind in the eaves and the distant, muffled sound of the forest below. Sometimes he stops to just look at a single letter he has made, admiring the way the ink has settled into the grain of the vellum, and he feels a kinship with every scribe who has ever looked at a blank page and filled it with peace. The ink on his fingers and the dust on his tunic are a source of comfort, a sign that he has spent his day in honest work, and he feels a deep and humming peace that radiates out from his chest to his very fingertips as the day moves on in its slow and perfect circle. He watches the tiny bubbles in the inkwell, the way they burst so softly, and he feels the stillness of the stone scriptorium soaking into his very bones. Chapter 3. The afternoon sun has begun its long and lazy slide toward the horizon. The light in the stone scriptorium turning from a rich amber to a deep, warm purple. And the scribe feels a gentle, sleepy fatigue beginning to settle into his bones. A warm and pleasant tiredness that tells him the work of the day is done. He begins the final, quiet tasks of the evening with a body that feels heavy and pleasantly relaxed, moving through the study one last time to gather his tools and return them to their proper places in the wooden chest. He cleans his quills with a soft scrap of linen, wiping away the last traces of dark ink until the nibs are bright and white once more, and he places them carefully in their wooden boxes, hearing the small, final click of wood against wood in the quiet room. He closes the ink jars with a slow and deliberate twist of his wrist, ensuring that the lids are tight and the liquid is safe, and he stacks the finished sheets of parchment in a neat, orderly pile that feels solid and significant under his hand. He rises from his chair with a slow stretch, his joints feeling loose and warm in the fading light, and he begins to walk the long aisles of the library for the last time that day, checking each window to ensure that everything is in its place. He moves from sconce to sconce, extinguishing the candles with a small metal snuffer, watching the tiny curls of smoke rise into the air and disappear into the darkness. And with each flame that goes out, the room becomes a little cooler, a little more blue, and the silence becomes a little deeper. The smell of the extinguished wicks is a smoky, nostalgic scent that signals the end of the journey, and the scribe breathes it in with a sense of completion and peace, feeling the weight of the day falling away as the world prepares to sleep. He walks slowly back toward his small cell, his footsteps making a soft, rhythmic thud on the floor, and he sees the first star beginning to twinkle through the window, a tiny diamond of light in the fading blue of the sky. He enters his room and feels the softness of the evening air on his face, a cool and refreshing breeze that carries the scent of the sleeping garden and the damp stone. He undresses with slow and practiced movements, laying his tunic across a wooden stool and feeling the lightness of his body as he steps into the cool, dark space of his bed, where the blankets are waiting for him like a warm embrace. He climbs into his bed, the linen sheets feeling cool and crisp at first, but quickly warming to the heat of his body as he pulls the thick wool blankets up to his chin, tucking the man around his shoulders until he is encased in a cocoon of warmth and safety. He lies there for a moment with his eyes open, looking at the dim outlines of his room, the familiar shapes of the chest and the chair, and the small window where the moonlight filters through in a pale silver beam. His muscles feel loose and heavy, every tension of the day melting away into the soft mattress, and he lets his head sink into the pillow, his thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. The silence of the monastery is total, a deep and liquid quiet that fills his ears and his heart. And he knows that the parchment is resting on the desk, the books are resting on the shelves, and the world is exactly as it should be, safe and still under the watch of the moon. He closes his eyes and breathes in the faint scent of ink that lingers on his fingers, and as the house settles around him with a final, gentle sigh, he drifts off into a sleep that is as deep and nourishing as the words he has spent his day copying. He feels the monastery around him, a sturdy shell of stone and timber, protecting him from the wind and the night, and he sinks further into the softness of the bed, his breath becoming a slow, rhythmic wave that carries him away. The world is far away now, a distant and hazy place that has no power over the stillness of his room. And he is a part of the night, a part of the parchment, and a part of the peace that remains when the ink is dry.